Mama Tina, Mama Papa and everyone lived in the buses and the tumble-down shacks. Home sweet home was Jackson's track. If only could I turn the time back, mix it with the lovers and the lumberjacks. Listen to the echo of the old broad axe rang through the hills of Jackson's track.
A raucous welcome.
A raucous
Come on, just give a raucous welcome.
This is terrible.
Just do it.
Welcome back to the Kurnai Connection. No, I'm not going to get it. Hang on. Welcome back to Kurnai Connection. This is Linda Mullet.
That's right. You are Linda Mullet, aren't you? And
yes, I am.
well, that's marvellous. And isn't it great having a Kurnai show?
It is great to have a Kurnai show because it just showcases what the clan has done here in Victoria.
Fabulous. Couldn't have put it better myself. And now you're actually on today's show, and that was the time when you were giving talks around the libraries and different community halls about your dad and that fabulous doco made about him. What was that doco called?
It was called Winding Back, the Australian Stories by Tim Lee, and it was just around his life story out of his book.
Yeah. I know, and his book is fantastic. So let's go and see what you're going to tell us, hey? Hey, Linda Mullet, and here we are in your scrumptious backyard in Druin, and you've been doing quite a bit of public speaking around the place. And tell us what you've been up to.
Yeah, Chrissy, I've been up to what they call Professional Development Day for the librarians. You know, Aboriginal history was one of the things that they wanted to get more knowledge on. And out of that professional talk that I had out there, I played my father's story, Winding Back, that Tim Lee from the ABC had done.
That's a wonderful documentary about part of his life, isn't it?
It is part of what happened within the snippets out of the book that happened. There's a lot more that had happened, but it talked about the story of, you know, how the Aboriginal people settled out there and how the Border Protection left them alone and give them a little bit of freedom, and how Dad provided work for them and freedom out there to be on a land that he owned. So
out there being Jackson's Track.
That's exactly right, at Jackson Track near Jindavick. So anyway, it came back to doing a talk at the library. They said, would you consider doing, showing the video? We'd show the video which they brought in the library, and people can go in and book that video out and see the story. But on the day they said, you know, would you like to do it? And I said yes. So I went in thinking that there was only going to be 5 people, and the whole room was full. People are interested in knowing and wanting to help the Aboriginal people in the best way they can. They feel that these people felt that it's a great story, and they can't believe, comments were that they couldn't believe that this was happening in their lifetime growing up. So to me it's about reconciliation, them working with their own communities by saying, you know, this is what's happened to Aboriginal people, you know, do their research and homework before they decide to judge and get the understanding of what happened to Aboriginal people back in the you know, 30s, 40s and right up until the 70s.
I knew your dad, and he was an incredibly humble man. I mean, he would have been so surprised because he's become quite an historical, famous local figure, hasn't he?
He certainly has, and he just couldn't understand what all the fuss was about when the book was done. And you know, he's just a simple lifestyle, didn't want much, and that's what it was like for Aboriginal people. They were happy out in that community. They just had a simple life. They didn't have, you know, all the pros and cons. They were happy just living a natural life out there, and he loved to be part of that, and provided the land and the work when they needed to work, and he really enjoyed the atmosphere. But the book is all around a love story too, where he fell in love. Well, he thought he fell in love with me mother. He just...
What do you mean he thought he fell in love?
Well, he said he wasn't the courting kind. He just wanted somebody to care and clean in his hut out there, and he just liked her, I guess. He didn't know what love was, I guess, and it tells him how he broke his heart when Harry took
Eufy away.
Yeah, that's right. It must have been devastating to have to come home to the campfires and find her gone.
Well, he would have realised then that he loved her, because he chased her, he followed her, didn't he, when she got a letter to him, and he went up and found her at Lake Tyers and brought her back.
That's right, and he must have found out he did love her then, and that's what happened. But, the whole community at that stage must have been devastated to find that they've taken Mum off the property. But, they thought they were doing the best thing for the community out there. But, it breaks people's hearts when you love and care somebody that's just been taken the right way for the colour of her skin, which was part of what they thought was the right thing to do,
Yeah, well, now how does it feel with your mum and dad's love story being so public now?
To us, we weren't told how it was all set out, and it's quite amazing to hear it and see him on that video. It broke his heart. There was a bit of a tear in his eye, and I think it's so romantic, but a different way of romantic coming on. They were so bonded that it didn't keep them apart. It built more strength, I guess, that both of them really wanted each other, and that brought them together stronger, I guess, by taking him away.
Australian history in the schools, it certainly doesn't tell the truth about the past, does it?
No, not at all. They have no idea of how Aboriginal people have been treated here in Victoria.
Good. Well, let's get back on with the show, after the break.
Welcome back to Kurnai Connection.
That's right. Now we're back to you again.
Yes.
I remember him telling me how he didn't even build a bark hut until you kids came along. He and Eufy slept out under the stars.
Yeah, that'd be right. Yeah, that's right. He probably didn't need to do anything at that point in time. I don't know how she felt, but certainly his way of thinking, a real bushman that, he worked hard, and you recommend him for that. What he gave us, we thought was the best thing, and we were just happy. We didn't care what the life of the house was or the bark huts were. It was just a natural thing that was going on out there. So to me, it was a wonderful experience. Just living in that environment didn't hurt us, and I think we came out better people for it.
Too right. And he also told me that he used to sleep in hollow logs before Eufy.
That wouldn't surprise me at all, the way he was, because he was dedicated to the bush, and wherever he laid his head, I guess, when he was tired after working, he'd just lay his head down anywhere, and those are the sorts of things I can imagine him doing. There was nights where we didn't see him, in the moonlight. He'd work at night and come home late at night, and even in the mornings, he'd be up and at 'em and out and working very hard, very strong man, and wanted to provide for his family, which he did in a way, with all the carry-ons that were going on around the place between, non-Aboriginal people and Aboriginal people. The community out there used to go into town, and, days when we didn't see men come back because they weren't allowed in town, pools and shops, and, this is back in the 50s and 60s growing up, so it was very difficult. Weren't allowed into the schools until a certain time, so it was very hard. But all that, the feel of the place did not even say that there was anything happening outside of that community, even though we had white people coming and going. They lived in harmony. There was there was rules and regulations out there as well under the community banner, and if they mucked up, they were out of the community. But certainly they lived in harmony through the blacks and whites there, and certainly people we respected each other and knew their grounds out there, and it was, you know, you didn't know that the Border Protection were on our tail, and we didn't realise that people out there were looking to seek where we could be based at a certain time when legislation was changing. So all that was kept under the cover and we were protected. So it wasn't a feeling of anger or anything. It was, this is what we do, so we just accept what was going down. I don't know what it was like for other families. For us, it was sad just to see them come off the track, you know, and had to. We were very lucky that we had a father that owned the property, and you know, we just moved back out off, you know, out of sight, out of mind type thing. But for people that came off, it was horrific. It sort of, you could see the disperse and the way people couldn't connect in towns, whether they were 5 minutes around the road. There was none of that feeling comfortable about the environment and the isolation that happened between my grandmother and her sister and me, you know, uncles and when they went to Nearham South, you know, all the families sort of didn't collate.
Yes, that's right. Now, your sister Sandy swears black and blue that that all the health problems and socialising problems that a lot of Aboriginals have is because they're not living on country, and you had a wonderful experience of living on country out there, didn't you?
That's right, and they were under the, you know, authority all the time, and living out on country is the best way. It spiritually connects you to the land and strengthens the way that you think, the way that you can interact with people when you know where you belong and whose community you come from, and the strong stance of that is so important for Aboriginal people to know their identity and be proud of who they are, and they need to think along the lines of what's in their heart and what's best for them, not worry what other people are saying, and I think that's really important.
Yes, that's right.
Kids, you know.
Exactly, especially for your kids. Now, let's get back to the book for a moment. I'm sure there were quite a few things that you didn't know about your mum and your dad that you learnt after reading the book.
Yeah, there was. You know, I knew that my grandfather, you know, Mum told stories about him sneaking off lake tyres, and, you know, he was a man that was an activist for Aboriginal people. He didn't want to put up with, you know, handouts, and, you know, he's a very strong, powerful, full-blood man that wanted to provide for his family, and Dora, that was his wife, they really didn't want to be at Lake Tyres, so bringing him off, it was nice to hear that, you know, the family had settled out there, and asked Dad whether he could work for him. And of course, Dad was a man of face value and took anyone in, never judged anybody, and shook his hand and said, yeah, come on over. But Dad didn't realise, you know, out of the book that he'd be, you know, wasn't just a small family. It ended up to be a family of, you know, 150 people there, and, you know, he never said no to anybody, so...
150, that was about the top count, was it?
Yeah, that was about the top count. People coming and going, you know, and I'm sure they played cards at night and talked around the campfire and you know, bits and pieces in the community before they went to work the next day. And he said, you know, out of the book, he said, you know, if they didn't work, he didn't mind. He knew that they could care for themselves and live off the land when they needed to be.
Yes, your dear old dad and your mum, eh? Now, how did it feel for you lot discovering all these things about your mum and dad, and suddenly it was out in a book for everyone to read and learn about?
Quite proud, actually, to tell it how it is, like he wanted to tell it how it was, and you know, the truth's been told, and I think people need to understand what really went on back in that era.
Fantastic, and a very exciting time it was too. We'll see you after the break. Well, welcome back to Kurnai Connection, and we'll get on with it, shall we?
We shall. You know, the other side of the book was, you know, hearing, you know, how Mum used to wait on the doctors in town, you know, go in the morning and wouldn't finish until 6 at night because the patients... you know, the Dr. Power had to see the patients, the white patient before her, and she never said a word. She just sat and waited, because that's when we first went into schools, when we had come up with the diseases, the mumps and measles and things. So this is a new disease for people living out at Jackson Track. And, you know, she waited and provided. But he came back later on when the book was, I think he was in his 80s, and he apologised to Dad around what he had done. But we understood that was the way the authorities and governments were working with Aboriginal people. We weren't accepted in society at that time.
That was a good thing for him to do, wasn't it?
It was a good thing for him to do, to acknowledge, you know, and understand what we were going through. But
mind you, he obviously was a mongrel for doing it in the first place.
That's right. But he acknowledged it and was brave enough to go out there to say, you know, he was sorry about what he had done.
You're giving more talks, aren't you? What are some of the questions that people really want to know?
You know, some of them want to know what it was like living at Jackson Track. Some of them said, you know, what can we do now? How can we make things different? We're ashamed of what went on. And, you know, for me, I think it's around showing and acknowledging and moving on forward to where we can work together in harmony around reconciliation. And to me it's important and I say to people, it's important for them to talk to their community around, you know, this is what I've seen, you need to have a look at it, have another opinion around, don't just presume what you hear is right. And it's important to challenge people around their thinking as well.
Well, that was very good for people to respond like that.
That's right, yeah. I think people are more open now, and I think it's getting out there.
What about the kids? Do they get in amongst the white community much?
No, they're still not doing it much. They might do it in a sportive way. They're still not quite there, but I think we've got a lot of work to be done and start to open up those barriers around.
Well, it'd be, no doubt it'd come from both sides too, wouldn't it? I mean, naturally your families and cousins all want to hang around each other, but yes. I think there'd be a fair bit of resistance still among the white community, isn't there? Yeah,
there is still. There's still not open. I think education is an important thing. I think the school system needs to think about what they're teaching our kids, because really they're not looking at their personal development. They don't look at what their backgrounds are. They don't share that within the school, and I think that's the best place that could happen for anyone to you know, build their community, what the community's about, you know, what their identity is. It's important for it to happen at school. I think we've got to start moving on some of those things. If we want to close this gap, we need to think about, you know, don't put us in the category that we're all the same. We're not. We have a different background. We have a different lifestyle. Whether we're living in urban, our lifestyles are so different, and we like community, to be together and, you know, to look at what our kids are thinking.
Do you get much helpful assistance to get the communities happening?
Sometimes, you know, it all depends what's going on. It takes a little bit. That they do think of it all the time, but they've got to come back to leaders to try to get into the community to find out what their needs are. It's bits and pieces, and it's subtle stuff. We don't need to be overburdened with a lot of stuff. So slowly but surely.
You had that lovely walk.
We did have the lovely walk. Yes, that was great. That closed Smith Street down, and people were commenting next year that they'd like to be involved, bring some of the schools on. They think it's the best way to promote Aboriginal people, so they want to be involved, you know, supportive towards Aboriginal people. And we've still got the NAIDOC week, which we part in, and this will be the part of people being involved, coming together, learning together what it's like. Come and talk to us. We want to be proactive in a broader community, not just keep it to ourselves, but share it amongst, bring other people on board, and we step the journey together would be the best way to learn from each other, and I think that's so important to do that.
Well, that's fantastic, so keep up the good work, and you've got a lot on your plate.
Yeah, thanks Chrissy, thank you.
I thought you did a marvellous job there, Linda Mullet.
Thank you, Chrissy.
That's good. Now I suppose we'll see everyone again next week, will we?
Yes, we will.
For another exciting episode of Kurnai Connection. And we've got a surprise visit from your dear old dad.
Wonderful. I look forward to seeing that.
Some people say that you're a white Aboriginal. What do you think of that?
Oh, I'm not surprised with that because I like the black people. I could talk with them and we always had a lot in common.
You said in your book that black fellas have a map in their heads that no white fella could ever understand.
That's right.
You were a skilled bushman. You learnt a lot from Stuart Hood, didn't you?
Oh yes, I lived the same life as he did. We had a lot in common and he liked me and I liked him.
You ate a lot of bush tucker out there. What sort of bush tucker did you have?
Snakes, goannas.
How do you catch a goanna without being ripped to bits by it?
Oh, quite easily. Just a matter of cutting off their head. They were quite easy to take the skin off them, and once you took the skin off, you could cook it without damaging it.
When you sent your kids to primary school, they had to learn the 3 R's, but you reckon what they learn at schools is how to be a silly fool and how to learn to be greedy and to cheat.
Who said that?
You. You reckon that compared to the black fella, the white fella has no law?
They had no respect for the blacks. I don't know why. Goannas are a favourite story.
Yeah?
Because we've looked after them well. We'd always thought well of the goannas, even though we ate them. They're a special animal.
Snakes?
The snakes, we had no respect for snakes. Thought well of snakes to eat. The kids showed respect for them too. We killed the snakes.
What about the wallabies?
Oh yes, the wallabies we thought well of the wallabies.
Kangaroos?
There was a lot of kangaroos on Jackson's track. When we first were on Jackson's track, the wallabies were as many as 20 or 30 in a mob, and they kept getting less and less, but...
Did you look after the kangaroos like you did the goannas?
Oh yes, we thought a lot of kangaroos. They were quite a clean animal.
A bark hut was pretty easy to make, wasn't it?
Oh yeah, quite easy. Bark hut was, once you fall the tree, the bigger the tree, the wider sheets of bark.
In summer, you'd just take the walls away to make it cool, wouldn't you?
Yeah, oh yes. It was quite an easy hut to make cooler. You could take the bark off.
The hut that you built for Eufy, you made the bed out of bark.
Yeah, that's right. The bark made quite a good bed if you dry it out.
What sort of a person was Eufy?
She was a wonderful woman. She could do anything. She could turn her hand to anything, and she wasn't fighting hard work.
Civilization's moving along. Jackson's track has long since gone. It's gonna live in my memory. Home for my mama and my papa and me. If only could I turn the time back, mix it with the lovers and the lumberjacks. Listen to the echo of the old broad axe, rang through the hills of Jackson's track.
Stop! Stop!
Melbourne.